Defining history as a study of past human events does not give a complete and sufficient definition of the discipline. The working definition of history offered by progressive historians were formed out of our constant search for national identity that may push for the development of national consciousness. A Greek philosopher, Aristotle, used the word history, which meant a systematic account of a set of natural phenomena, whether or not chronological ordering was the factor in the account. History deals with the study of past events, presented in chronological order and often with explanation. Others define it as his story. Individuals who write about history are called historians. They seek to understand the present by examining what went before. They undertake historical research to come up with a meaningful and organized reconstruction of the past. But whose past are we talking about? This is a basic question that an historian needs to answer because this sets the purpose and framework of historical account. Hence, a salient feature of historical writing is the facility to give meaning and impart value to a particular group of people about their past. The practice of historical writing is called historiography. Traditional method in doing historical research focuses on gathering of documents from different libraries and archives to form a pool of evidence needed in making a descriptive or analytical narrative. However, modern historical writing does not only include examination of documents, but also the use of research methods from related areas of study such as archaeology and geography. Documents refers to handwritten, printed, drawn, designed, and other composed materials. This includes books, newspapers, magazines, journals, maps, architectural perspective, paintings, advertisements, and photographs. In the 20th century and up to now, memoirs of personal accounts written by important historical personages constitute another type of documents. Philippine presidents such as Emilio Aguinaldo, Manuel Quezon, and Diosdado Macapagal wrote their memoirs to highlight their roles as national builders. Archaeological records refers to preserved remains of human beings, their activities, and their environments. Under archaeological records are generally categorized as fossils and artifacts. Fossils are remains of animals, plants, and other organisms from the distant past, while artifacts are remnants of material culture developed by human beings. This includes clothing, farm implements, jewelry, pottery, and stone tools. Oral and video accounts form the third kind of historical source. These are audiovisual documentations of people, events, and places. Aside from scholar, media people also used oral and video accounts as part of their news and public affairs work. There are two general kinds of historical sources: the primary and secondary sources. Primary sources refers to documents, physical objects, and oral video accounts made by an individual or a group present at the time and place being described. These materials provide facts from people who actually witnessed the event. Secondary sources, on the other hand, are materials made by people long after the event being described had taken place. Many documents have primary and secondary segments. For instance, examining a newspaper as a historical source entails a discerning mind to identify its primary and secondary components. A news item written by a witness of an event is considered as a primary source, while a feature article is usually considered as a secondary material. Similarly, a book published a long time ago does not necessarily render it as a primary source. It requires a meticulous reading of the document to know its origin. External criticism answers concerns and questions pertinent to the authenticity of the historical source by identifying that composed the historical material, locating when and where the historical material was produced, and establishing the material's evidential value. Internal criticism, on the other hand, deals with the credibility and reliability of the content of a given historical source. This kind of criticism focuses on understanding the substance and message that the historical materials want to convey by examining how the author framed the intent and meaning of the composed material. The National Library has complete microfilm copies of the Philippine Revolutionary Records, a compilation of captured documents of Emilio Aguinaldo's revolutionary government, and the historical data papers. The National Archives, on the other hand, holds a substantial collection of catalogued and uncatalogued Spanish documents about the Philippines composed from 1552 to 1900s. Philippine historiography has changed significantly since 20th century. For a long time, Spanish colonizers presented our history in two parts: a period of darkness or backwardness before they arrived, and a consequent period of advancement and enlightenment when they came. In 1890, Jose Rizal came out with an annotation of Antonio de Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, Events in the Philippine Island, a book originally published in 1609. He used de Morga's book, a rare Spanish publication that positively viewed pre-colonial Filipino culture as a retort to the arrogant Spaniards. However, cultural bias against Filipino culture continued even after Rizal's death and the end of the Spanish colonialism. The stark of Filipino historians thinking like their colonial counterparts during the post-colonial period troubled a small group of professors and cultural workers. This spurred the emergence of Filipino scholars who challenged the narrow view of colonial narratives and developed historical writing from the viewpoint of nationalist agenda. Teodoro Agoncillo pioneered national historiography in the country by highlighting the role of the Filipino reformists and revolutionaries from 1872, the year that saw the execution of Gomburza priest, to the end of the Philippine Revolution as the focal point of the country's nation-building narrative. This discourse of lost history was not accepted by another known scholar, Renato Constantino, whose published work entitled The Miseducation of the Filipino. It became a staple reading for academics and activists beginning in the late 1960s. Other Filipino historians set new directions in redefining Philippine historiography in the last 30 years of the 20th century. The first of these scholars is Zeus Salazar. Equally important is the contribution of Reynaldo Lieto, who wrote about his history from below. There is Samuel Tan, another prolific historian who is remembered for mainstreaming the role and relevance of Filipino Muslims in the country's national history. And that's the first unit in the Readings in the Philippine History, which is an introduction to Philippine historiography, source, and discourse. And for you to know what to do for your next activity, I'm going to write it in the description below.